And we're live again. Good morning, everyone. Good morning at this fifth webinar this week. Every morning at 11, we presented a webinar. Good morning, Marcel. This time the webinar will be in English because it will be given by our CTO and co-founder of Rapid Circle, Daniel McPherson, and unfortunately he's from Australia. So his Dutch is less good than my English, I guess.
It's unfortunate that I'm from Australia, is it, Freerk? That's unfortunate. Unfortunate for who? If you guys thought ahead a little bit more, then maybe I could have been coming from the Dutch colony of Australia, but you didn't quite think ahead, did you?
Probably. Can you introduce yourself for a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think Freerk's introduction was already a good one. I'm unfortunately from Australia. My name is Daniel McPherson. And I'm, as Freerk said, one of the co-founders of Rapid Circle. I have a fairly operational role these days at Rapid Circle. So I look after a lot of our delivery teams. And I think my most important job is making sure that they have everything they need to be able to get their jobs done for our clients, clearing out any impediments they might have. And I think that that's been really good for me because I've been able to become familiar with the Power Platform, which is a great platform for streamlining internal processes and for solving small business problems quickly so that you get a really high return on investment. My background is a technical one, so I'm a developer at heart, and I still like to spend my weekends coding up. Although equally, what's been nice about the Power Platform is that the sort of adrenaline rush that I used to get from writing code for 2 weeks to solve a problem, I can now get from about 4 hours of coding up some flows and some Power Apps. So I find myself now spending most time, finding that rush that I get from coding and being technical by using tools like Power Apps and Flow. So I'm going to be talking about a few things today. I'm not going to go too technical unless there's people on the call that would like me to. So feel free to not hold back on any technical questions that you might have. I am speaking in English, as you've already discovered. I tend to start off talking in English very eloquently and articulately and slowly to start with. And then I think by the end of the meeting, as I feel that impending doom of the end of the webinar, I start to speak a little bit faster, and by the end of the meeting, sometimes people in English can't understand what I'm saying. So if you feel like I'm talking too fast, please just drop a note in the chat window as a little reminder so that I can slow down again.
Perfect. So sometimes I hear a little bit of a riddle in your voice from your ears. I don't know if anyone else also hears it. It feels okay. Like sometimes
I've got a bit of I have a drink of water as well. Nope, give me a nope. Okay.
Oh. Okay, well then it's perfect. Maybe it's only me.
It might be when I'm talking a bit loud.
No, it's fine.
Excited. Okay. Okay.
Perfect.
So we're ready to kick off.
Yes. What do you want to show to people?
Well, I think there's a few things. So I think first up, we're in a moment right now where I've just been absolutely amazed over the last 2 weeks about how quickly things are moving, especially in the healthcare industry. So I've been lucky enough to spend quite a bit of time with some healthcare customers over the last 2 weeks, helping them in any way we possibly can to prepare for obviously the coronavirus and its impact on hospitals and as COVID-19 starts to build up. So I think that really we've been in this moment of business done in high speed, and I think that's been nice to have the Power Platform at our disposal because I think the Power Platform does provide for supporting business when it moves at high speed. And I think that you can build solutions on the Power Platform really quickly that in the past, you would just not have enough time to even think about building a digital solution to solve a particular problem you might have. And we've got one good example of that, which is, I don't think it's got a real nice marketing name. And I think the Dutch, what is it in Dutch again, Freerk? It's, no, you're on mute, I think. I can't hear you. Okay, right, excellent. And so I think in English it's called the bed counting app.
Yeah.
The advantage of that name is it's pretty clear what it does. So when we talk to a few of our hospitals that we work with, we sort of discovered that the process involved in counting beds was often a fairly manual one. It was a process that often involved, sort of people walking around the hospital and Excel spreadsheets and talking to people about what availability there was on beds. And this Corona and COVID-19 scenario is really a very unique one. And it's meant that hospitals had to move at a dynamic speed that wasn't required, perhaps in the past. We also found that counting beds wasn't always supported in a particular hospital's EPD. And more transparency than ever was needed to see across the hospital what beds were available in what departments. So hospitals said to us they needed something really simple and something very specific. We didn't want to start trying to solve all the sorts of challenges around finding beds in the current climate, but we did need to provide a way for people to quickly capture how many beds were available in a given location, a given department. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen and give you a quick example of that app, because I think it shows how you can very quickly build a solution to a business problem and derive real value really quickly. So this is the Power app. Obviously, you'd run it on your mobile phone. So I think the nice thing, first of all, is once you've deployed Power apps in your organization, you don't have to battle with app stores or all those sorts of things. Rolling out a new app is a matter of publishing the app in your organization and then accessing it via the single Power app on your phone. So you've got that very quick deployment possibility. It is tuned for mobile phones, but you can also build Power apps to work on different form factors like iPads or desktop computers, which I'll see a little bit later on. So there's really two pieces of functionality here. You can create a new entry for a bed count, or you can view the existing bed counts. So if I click on the new, off it goes. There's some drop downs here to help you decide which location that you're going in. There's some drop downs here to help you find the right ward. And then you can say the total number of beds, the number of beds that are in use for COVID-19, and the number of beds that are not in use for COVID-19. And once you're done, then you can save that away. There's some validation to make sure that you've entered all the fields and all that sort of stuff. But it's very, very simple, and that's 100% the intention, is to make sure that this is very simple. If I was to go back to the home page, I can also have a look at all the existing beds by clicking that button there, and I can see at a quick glance, and this is test data, by the way, but I can see at a quick glance all the hospital beds and what's available and what's used for COVID-19. And I can go and edit that information right here as well. And that's it. And you might think that's a really, really simple application, but I think that's why that's what makes the platform great. Is that's the sort of thing that someone who's familiar with the Power Platform and SharePoint, which is the back-end data store for that particular application, that's the sort of thing that someone who's familiar with both those platforms can do in a matter of hours, not a matter of days.
So, and this application, you said you can install it on your mobile phone. Is it also possible to use it from out of the browser on your mobile phone?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a browser-based application. There's obviously nothing you need to install on the client. So yeah, you can really access it from anywhere, which I think it was one of the primary goals of the Power Platform, was to provide this no-code, low-code platform for applications, no matter what device you're using, any device, anywhere, anytime. Yeah.
So what we've done here is that there's a need in an organization, and normally the current application doesn't provide that solution, and with easy with Power Platform, it's easy to create within a day or in 2 days an application that fulfill the needs from the business. That's what basically is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just a smaller side, we had a similar we faced a similar thing at Rapid Circle, where I think 2 weeks ago we were going from a mode of sort of planning things on weeks or months, and that changed to sort of planning things on an hour-by-hour basis because of the dynamic nature of things that were happening at our clients and things that are happening at Rapid Circle. And so on the Monday night after a lot of the lockdown provisions came in, I spent 3 or 4 hours building a little Power App that basically just showed everyone in the team. It showed what they were working on a given day, and it gave everyone in the team the ability to say whether someone was busy or not. And if they're not busy, we could make sure they're working on these sorts of solutions for clients or other activities like webinars and things like that. So yeah, as someone who looks after the operations at Rapid Circle, it's a real important tool in my toolkit to be able to run processes like a daily stand-up huddle that we have now, a Corona huddle, to run those processes based on a Power App that just sort of guides us through who do we talk about, who needs work for today, which clients have got incoming demand. It's a great tool to have. They're effectively throwaway applications because the investment is not high in building them. So yeah.
There was a question from Bart. He's asking how to keep it actual. I think that's about the COVID app. Can you explain that, how that works?
So keep it actual, meaning like how to keep it up to date, how to keep the information in it relevant. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is in real time. So the minute someone on a ward picks up the app and updates the information on there, then that information is instantly available to everyone else using the app. So you can imagine someone in a hospital having that app deployed. At any point in time, they can just refresh that screen and they see the data as it was completed, even if it was completed just 30 seconds ago by a doctor in a ward that was even on the other side of Amsterdam. So it's all done in real time. And I don't want to sort of overplay the capabilities of this application. It's a very simple, very basic application, but it does the job, and that's the most important metric as far as I'm concerned with an application like that.
Yeah, perfect. If there are other questions, then we can move forward, I guess.
Sure. So I'll keep moving. I think another thing that we've seen at a lot of our clients is that they've deployed Teams really quickly, and I think that's been a real success of Teams, that it is possible to roll it out really quickly. And I'm really happy to see that happen. And in fact, my wife works for the HKD, and she's an infectious disease specialist. So she's been very much involved in the defense of Holland. And I was only talking to her yesterday morning about how much benefit she should get from Teams. And sure enough, at lunchtime yesterday, she started to see Teams being rolled out at her organization to support them working from home better. So I think it's a really fantastic thing that Teams is getting deployed as fast as it is to support all of us in our social distancing efforts. And I think that's the first phase. The first phase of getting Teams out there is to make sure that people have access to the real-time capabilities that Teams has. So things like being able to chat, being able to share your screen, being able to do a video call. Those sorts of capabilities are really important. Of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as what Teams can do for your organization. And I think after this immediate need has passed, what's going to be interesting is working out how to make sure that Teams continues to support your business, regardless of what business that is. And I think that that's where this controversial concept of governance comes in. I say controversial because I used to be on one side of the governance discussion, and more recently over the last 6 to 9 months I've swapped sides. So I think I used to have a very hostile view of governance because I always felt that it made me angry, like I say on this slide, because what I saw is that organizations would buy platforms like Teams, but then they'd lock it down so that all of the features that I would want weren't available to me. So I fought against it. I would fight against organizations that stopped me from being able to create new teams, that stopped me from being able to create new channels, all those sorts of things. And I felt that people would buy software for one reason, and then after they'd bought it, they'd turn off all the features they bought it for. So I was very frustrated about this, and I wanted the software to be set free. And I think that's the risk with organizations deploying teams in a hurry, is that after this passes, they won't have put a lot of the governance and controls in place, which you actually need to have in order for teams to be successful and not fall into the same traps that platforms like public folders or Lotus Notes or SharePoint Teams have sort of fallen into in the past, where it becomes overwhelmingly disorganized and you never quite know where to find things. And so what I found at Rapid Circle is that about 12 months ago or 18 months ago, after we'd sort of really fully embraced Teams, that I started to get all these join team requests. And I think this, if you haven't faced this yet, I think with your new Teams deployments, or maybe even the existing ones you have, this will start to be a problem for you, where every morning you'll come into the office, you'll open up your Outlook, and you'll be inundated with invitations to join new teams. And those teams will be because a project has started, because someone has a good idea, because of your role, because of your function. There could be any number of reasons why. But as a result of this and joining all of these teams, the teams will lose its value, and you really won't, you'll start to get overwhelmed with your membership in teams and where information is coming in and all of that. So we really saw teams appearing inside Rapid Circle at an absolutely staggering rate. And teams really started to feel useless. So I did something that I thought I would never do, and that is I came in, it was on a weekend, I remember it very vividly, and I said, right, that's it. I'm implementing governance top down. And I decided that I would prevent anyone from being able to create teams across the organization. And the minute after I did that, I felt like this. I had this moment of zen, where I came in on the Monday morning and there were no new teams invitations. Very quickly after that, I obviously realized that we couldn't sort of keep going forward without creating teams, because there was real value associated with them. So I started to give some thought about, when, under what circumstances do the people at Rapid Circle actually need to be able to have a team? So what is it about teams and the way teams is built that supports the business that we do? And so I came up with this incredibly insightful quote, full of wisdom, and I'm hoping to become famous, and this will be in my New York Times obituary. And that is that the only thing better than being able to create your own team is discovering that the team that you wanted is created already. And I messed up my own quote. That was brilliant. There it is. I can read it on the screen, and I messed up my own quote, but I think you've got it all there in front of you. So the idea is the only thing better than being able to create your own team is to find the team you want has already been created. And you don't have to waste that time of going through the process of creating a new team. So that's what I did. And I started thinking about how we might do that. So how would I get to a place where teams that people need were already created? And what I discovered is that our business is really already very well defined inside of a tool, and that tool, in our case, is Exact. Now, if you're in the healthcare industry, that tool might be the sort of software that underpins your hospital. It might be something from Chipsoft or one of those other tools. But what you will find is that the way that you need to work together in teams is probably a problem that has already been solved. And it's probably a problem that has data that describes the structure in some other system. And so the challenge we then set ourselves is at Rapid Circle is, how do we take that structure that's already in Exact, and that structure being things like clients and projects. I know it's accurate and exact because that's what drives all of our financial processes. So how do I get those entities that we collaborate on from Exact and get them into Microsoft Teams? And that's where I really started to get stuck into Microsoft Flow, or as it's now called, Power Automate, because that's a tool that's really built for exactly this purpose. The first thing I noticed was that while Flow has hundreds and hundreds of different connectors, Exact, as big as it is in Holland, is not very big in Seattle. So you couldn't expect Microsoft in Redmond to have gone and done all the work to produce fantastic connectors into Microsoft Exact. But at the same time, Exact has a really fantastic API. And so this brought out the developer in me. For those who aren't too technical, an API is basically a way of exposing all the functionality of Exact, but not to a user, to a developer. So you can create a new project in Exact using the web interface, but you can also create a new project in Exact using software and just passing in text parameters and getting back text results. So the nice thing about Flow is that you can build your own connectors. So you don't need to rely on Microsoft to create a connector to a software platform that you might be running at your hospital or organization. And essentially what you're looking for is any software that supports what's called a REST API and what's called the JSON data format. And if you've got that, then you're only literally hours away from connecting that application into the broader Microsoft Power Automate ecosystem. So it's super powerful. So what you see here on the left is, if you're familiar with Flow, I'm adding a new action into a flow, and then what you'll see there is a whole lot of actions that are things that you do inside of Exact. So that was a real fantastic epiphany for me. And then I started to think, right, how can I now take all of the information out of Exact? And then I can start to do things like, when we create a new client in Microsoft Exact, let's create a new team inside of Teams. When we create a new project in Exact, let's create a new channel inside of Teams. And that's exactly what we did. And so overnight, I went through and created, I think, 400, 500 teams in a consistent manner for every single client that we've got. And I then went inside of each one of those teams and I created a channel for every single project we had registered for every single client. And that fulfilled, I think, 80% of the requirements that we had for Teams inside of Microsoft Teams. And so very quickly, that eliminated every request for Teams that I was getting, and people found that the teams were already there. So I'll take a quick pause at that point because I see there's a couple of questions.
Exactly. There's one. So the question is, what are the API requirements to work with Flow? You mentioned REST and JSON. What about authentication?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, because the easy bit really is the REST, is having to work with REST. So that's REST is a way of describing the approach you take to providing an API. And it uses the HTTP verbs as an important way of encapsulating the API. So I won't go into more detail than that, but essentially everyone today is writing REST APIs. JSON is really a simplified version of XML. So in the old days, we used to have XML, and then we decided that was a bit too complicated. So then we moved to JSON. And if you look at JSON, even if you're not technical, you'll quickly understand it. It's just curly brackets, it's just fields, and it's just properties. Those things are really easy to work with, and Flow and Power Automate and the Power Apps platform are all native. So they really, really, really like to work with things when they come in REST and JSON. They're just completely happy. But the hard bit is authentication, and there are a number of different modes of authentication, and these vary from OAuth to API keys, which are essentially just long passwords, to basic authentication. The Power Automate platform does support all of them, but the time it takes to get your custom connector working will depend on which authentication method you want to use. Now, if you take Exact, for example, there's not a good authentication method for server-side applications, which is effectively what you're doing when you're using Flow. But the nice thing about Power Automate is that you can authenticate in a delegated mode, which means I'm authenticating as a user rather than as a server. And Flow will actually manage the credential for you. So it'll do things like refresh the token and re-log in and all of that, so that you can run server-side applications using a user context without having to store usernames and passwords. So it gets pretty technical, but the bottom line is nearly every authentication method can be done with a custom connector. That's the most important thing.
Interesting. And I can imagine that you said the connection, you create a connection between, in this example, Exact and Teams. flow. But I can imagine that the connection won't last forever. Sometimes there are hips in it, or there are problems. Yep. Is there a dashboard or a notification that you get when something is missing?
In a way that they are self-repairing. So you sort of have to build flows when you build the logic in them, such that you're assuming that at any given moment they might be offline for 4 hours because the connection expired or whatever else. So that's not something we'll go into in detail here, but that's something that I've definitely learned over the last 1.5 years building flows at Rapid Circle. Whenever you do lose a connection to a source, then you'll get a pop-up you get an email up in Flow saying, hey, you need to reconnect. And you just click on reconnect, you put in your username and password, and away you go. And if you built your flows in the right way, they'll just pick up where they left off, and you're back in business. All right, so with that, what I thought I might do is take a bit of a segue.
At my side, it's sometimes that the connection is slow with your talking and view. I don't know if any other one has that problem.
Checking in. Okay. Freerk's disappeared. Well, I think, I'm still here.
Daniel?
Which was a bit tricky. Yes, I'm still here, Freerk.
Looks like that, do you hear me?
Yes,
okay, it looks like that the connection is a little bit bad. Otherwise, maybe turn off your camera and try for a minute like that.
Okay, sure. I'll drop off my camera.
Because I think you want to show some things now, so let's try if that.
I do, yeah. How do I stop my camera?
I can do that for you, I guess. Down in your screen, there's a webcam icon. If you click on that, then it will you will turn it off. Found it? Daniel?
Okay. Freerk.
Daniel. I can hear you, but it's still a little bit strange.
Okay. Can you still hear me? Test 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Now it sounds, for me, it sounds good. Can someone react on that? Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm back.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
All right, excellent. A few tense moments there. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. Apologies, you don't see my smiling face. I'm sure you'll survive. All right, so what I'm going to do now is just show you a couple of things. So I think, first of all, we talked a bit about, let me show you this thing over here first. So here on my screen, what you'll see is the custom connectors. And what you'll see in here is that the top one is Exact Online. And so if I just edit that and then go to the definition, and it gets a little bit technical, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But basically, all I've got in here is the different API points from Exact. And then I've coded the URL, and I've coded the response and the parameters. So it's really that simple. And this is the process you need to go through to add Exact as a new connector in Flow. And then if I go back to my flows and I look for one of my Exact flows, then here's an example of where I'm pulling in all the leave information from Exact. So I'm looking at my flow. What I do is I grab all of the team members, and then I've got a little loop here. And in my loop, I'm going out and saying, get all the leave registrations. So this particular action is going to call into Exact. It's going to get all my leave registrations that are after a certain date and time. It's going to pull in these particular fields. And the token here is what you use to page the results that come back from Exact. And that's it. And so in doing this, I create a synchronization between Exact and SharePoint. And once I've got all the information in SharePoint, then I can drive lots of other applications from that list inside of SharePoint, where it's really easy for me to access using Power Apps. So that's effectively how I do things with Exact. And you can imagine that I do that with projects and with clients. Only one of the actions I put over here in my flow is creating a new team or creating a channel in a team. So that's it.
So it's if I see it like correctly, it's a if this then that, and it's quite easy to plug and play. And you say, okay, I want to use this resource, this decision or this action should be happening, and you can create all kinds of steps to do with that data.
Absolutely. Yep. And to put it in perspective, here are the list of flows that Rapid Circle uses today to underpin its business. And we literally have more than 200 different flows that integrate applications across the platform. And what gets to be really nice is, when you're using Exact and you've got a project, you need to say who can write time on that project in the timesheet system. And what we do is we grab that information about who can write time, and behind the scenes, we automatically add those people into the team. So not only are you creating teams when you create a client, creating channels when you create a project, but you're also automatically managing the membership of that team based on the restrictions you're placing on who can write time in a project. So things really grow out from there, and it becomes really interesting when you can use Flow to connect all these different systems to sort of streamline what otherwise is what I call busy work. It's sort of the work that you have to do to keep things moving, but that doesn't actually really add any value to your business or your clients or your patients or anyone else you're working with. Yeah. So behind the scenes at Rapid Circle, people not only do they not have to create teams, but often they don't even need to manage the membership of those teams. It's all done automatically behind the scenes.
Yeah, so you automate a lot of processes within the organization, so it takes less time to maintain everything, but also it's not possible to get any error again, or that people are in the wrong teams or not aligned or stuff like that. So the amount of mistakes are lower.
Exactly. Yeah. I think what you want to do is keep that left-hand column of teams manageable for people. It doesn't work if there are 100 of teams there. So you want to keep it nice and manageable, and you don't want people to think about it. On their first day at Rapid Circle, they will already have a team for their Rapid Circle, for their country, for their role, for their team, and for all the clients that they're going to work on. And that's already taken care of on their first day when they sign into teams. There's nothing they need to do. I think it really works well.
And there's a question from Johan, and he's asking, any experience with SAP connectors?
I haven't got any experience with Flow and SAP. In my old days, I did quite a lot of work with SAP integrations with the BAPI. I remember trying to decipher table names that are written in German. I expect that SAP's come a long way since then. So I can't speak with any direct experience, but I'd be pretty sure there'd be a way to connect Flow to SAP. Yeah, and this is what's nice about Flow is in my days when I was developing, your integration projects were the most complex, most expensive, most difficult projects you had to do. Whereas with Flow, it just flips it on its head. And integration becomes a point and click proposition, which I think is just fantastic. It's so satisfying to work on this stuff with Flow versus how integration projects used to be. So earlier, I showed you a Power App, which is the bed counting app, and that was a really simple app. Power Apps doesn't have to only be a platform for simple apps. You can build quite complicated apps using Power Apps as well. And so there's two apps that I just wanted to quickly show you. I think one is one that we introduced about 6 months ago, and it solves that problem that I think every company has, which is basically, what's the latest template? Okay, I need to do a document. Where is the rapid circle template? Is it the latest version? And where do I store it? Where do I save it after I've completed it? So what now happens is that this particular Power App is included in a tab within a team in the Everyone team, and so it's very readily available for anyone to find this particular app. And when they go to the app, they go to this new document screen. Over here, they've got different categories of templates. It's different for each location, as we have 3 locations in India, Australia, and Holland. And you can also choose for different languages. We support Word documents and presentations as well. But when I click on one of the links over here, I can start to fill in the information. So this is a webinar demo. Here is my subtitle and author. And then down here, I can say, because it's a client document, then I need to specify who the client is, and I also pick the project. And what's nice about that is I can then say, well, we can automatically store that document for you directly into the project channel. So I don't have to create the document and then go into Teams, find my client, find my project, and then upload it into the files. By using this tool, it automatically creates the document directly in the right place, right from the very beginning. And you're up and running and creating that document. There's also some nice features like different cover pages. So depending on the industry you might be working with or whatever else, you can choose a different cover page. When I've completed that information, I just click on the create button and away it goes. Now behind the scenes, what's happened is that's gone out and it's called a flow. So I'll just quickly show you the flow. But with Flow, you can create your own APIs, which is really nice. And so behind the scenes, what I'm doing here is I get the template definition, which is defined in a SharePoint list. If it's for a client, I get the client details, again, from a client list that has been synchronized from Exact. I get the project information, which is from Exact. I get all the document properties that were passed in, including the version, copyright year, author, a whole lot of different things. And then I create the document using a tool that we have, which is a custom tool. And again, this is also a nice thing about Flow, is that Flow can do a lot, but where it can't do things, you can call out to a Microsoft Azure function where you can build real C# high-end development code. And so what I end up doing is sometimes when there's something that Flow can't do, I write 30 lines of code, I put it in a function, and then I call it within my Flow to do a particular job. And so that really is a nice blend between sort of declarative point-and-click solutions and your traditional coding solutions. And then I create the document. Now what I've got over here is my Teams. So Teams is running, and what I should get is a little message, which I've just got here, saying that there's been a template created by Daniel McPherson, and here's the document ready to go. So it took less than 30 seconds. When I click on the link, what you'll see is it's gone out, and here is the webinar demo. It's got the information that I sent in from the Power App. It's got the image, who the author is, the company, and it's even gone out and automatically added the logo from the client into the document as well, which is always a nice touch that we can go and do. If I look at where the document is, here it's stored in the client team and it's stored in general. So I think the project I selected didn't have a project channel for some reason. I think it's an internal project, that's probably why. But the main thing is it's found its way into the client location. So it's there ready for us to go and collaborate. So that this one app solved about 5 problems in one go. And I've been really, really happy with the sort of adoption we have at Rapid Circle. I think since it went live, we've created about 150 documents using this tool. And it's done a great job in organizing our documents better, in saving, again, that busy work that people have of trying to find the last time they used a template or talking to their colleagues about it. It just gets them up and running really, really quickly. So before I move on, is there any questions around that, Freerk? Or
I haven't seen any.
Okay.
I do think it's very, very interesting. If people have questions, please feel free to ask.
Sure. So after we solved that problem, there was another one that came up, which is around contracts. And I think that now is also a good example of where we're trying to move as many processes as we can to digital processes, because We're not in a position where we can sign contracts right now. We've got the social distancing, which is stopping us from signing contracts. So we've been working really hard to onboard a lot of our contracts into this Power Apps-based contracting tool. So what I'm going to do is swap into Netherlands, for example. We've got a number of HR-related contracts for employment, and we've also got all of our NBA contracts in here. And these are all highly managed contracts. So what I can do, for example, to create a new contract from our HR team is select a contract and then click on Create. And then what it does is it provides us with all of the fields that are changeable between those contracts. And so you'd fill in first name, last name. These are all validated. So if I do that, it's not a real email until I do that. These are all validated fields to make sure that we get things accurate. And then at the bottom here, we also describe what the approval cycle is going to be before that contract is completed. Our contracts go through 2 approval cycles. So after you create a contract, it first goes to the person who started the contract to do a review and make sure that it's what they want. When it's what they want, they then approve that, and it goes to a second approval, which is by the person who's responsible for actually signing the contract. And once they approve it, then it gets sent automatically by DocuSign. So it's an end-to-end process for doing contracts, and it meant that processes that used to take 2 or 3 days are now done literally in hours. So over here, after a contract has been created, we've got this contract management page, and you can click on your contracts that are displayed on the left, and then you'll see all the information about the contract. So this is all test data, but here you'd see your contract in a nice little window that you can review. I can see that it's a managed contract. So with DocuSign, there's a concept, in our implementation, there's a concept of a managed contract, which is a contract that you can create via the tool. But there's also an unmanaged contract, and that's a contract you can just upload directly to DocuSign. We capture and look after both types of contracts. So there's no contract at Rapid Circle that is sent via DocuSign that isn't captured and managed via this contract tool. I can see where it's at from an approval point of view, and then I can do my filing. So if this particular contract was related to a client, then I could select that client, and I could automatically save it away into the client team, into a contracts folder that we've got into the administration channel. So it's, again, what is normally a manual process, we've done and mapped that onto this electronic process, complete with activities like filing your contracts, which is an activity that people are used to having to perform. So that's the second one, which has been, really, really nice to implement. And behind the scenes, again, it uses a fairly complex flow. So here's a flow that gets contract definitions, gets the properties, does the approvers, goes into a contract registry, so we can see all the contracts that have been sent. If it's not a standard contract, it automatically gets sent to our legal department to say, hey, here's a contract that you haven't approved before, so maybe you want to check it out. There it goes. For your information, I think it's probably about 2 weeks of work that I put into this tool to build it. So it's the sort of thing you can do quite quickly.
Yeah, that was just a question indeed. How long does it take to create a complex flow like this? But I think 2 weeks is for everything, or was it only the flow?
So 2 weeks would be for example, the documents functionality, or for building the contract functionality in there. And I think that one of the things that's tricky about flow and what takes the time is that it's quite a difficult thing to test. You don't have sort of the old-fashioned concepts of a DTAP environment, and it's hard to build separate environments for doing testing and for doing production. So the thing that becomes quite difficult, I think, is just at the end doing a final bit of testing to make sure that everything you've done works. So you need to be working with people in the business that are very motivated and understand that you're going to need to go through a few very agile cycles of testing and testing again before you've got the solution really working nicely. So I think that's been the main thing.
Okay, I'm wondering if any one of the attendees have questions like this, like business cases where they can use Flow or Power Apps. So if you have anything that you think, well, this could be interesting for us, please leave it in the chat, and then you can think along how you could approach that. And Kate also
asked, yes, it's all done directly in production. Yes. Yeah. So it's scary. But I think another thing I've learned from flow, and like I said, we have 200 flows that are running, and that there's some maintenance you need to do on those. But I think that, it's a real agile mentality. You have to sort of, when a flow fails, you get a warning to say a flow failed, and the sort of debugging experience you have in a flow is really good. It'll say it failed on this step, and you've got all the information you need to sort of work out why it failed. And the nice thing is then you can fix it, and then you can go back and say, well, now replay this. And so I'm not going to show it, but we manage all of our invoicing process also using Power Apps. And that was a really complicated process as well. And obviously it's not a process you want to go wrong, because that means invoices don't get sent. And so it was a case of working really closely with our PMO team to make sure that every invoice did get sent. And then when things failed, I would fix it, and then I would replay that particular step again until it worked. And then I just keep squashing bugs by doing that constant, continuous improvement. It's kind of like a lean method where you fix every single defect. That's sort of the same sort of approach you have to have with these flows. Yep, we've got a top desk connector as well. So in the invoicing process I talked to you about before, we have consultants who write their time in timesheets in Exact, but our top desk team are often tracking how much hours they spend on things in top desk. And so we have two types of things that we import from top desk, one of them being incidents and one of them being change requests. And every Monday I gather every single incident that came in for a particular customer, and I automatically enter that information into a timesheet in Exact. So basically it meant that our team who do all the support for our customers don't have to write time in Exact anymore. And so it cut down on that busy work, which I keep talking about. It's just an incremental productivity improvement, and these incremental productivity improvements across the team really start to add up over time. And it also meant that we didn't make any mistakes. So we don't have to worry anymore about people putting a dot in the wrong place, or not crossing off everything when they did the export from Exact or whatever else. And yes, the nice thing about building a connector to Exact or building a connector to Top Desk is that once you build that connector and it's available in Flow, you have now created a connection between that particular system, like Top Desk, with every other connection you've got in the Flow ecosystem. So not only have I created a connection between Teams and Top Desk, a two-way connection, but I've also created a connection between Top Desk and Exact. So the sort of the things that you can do with these connectors as you start to build them starts to multiply out. And yeah, once you get started, you might have trouble coming up with ideas about what to do, but pretty quickly you start to get overwhelmed with the number of ideas that you can realize with Flow and Power Apps and the connectors you've got available to you.
So the question from Hans, connecting Teams to Top Desk or the other way around, that's all possible.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hans, if you want, you can explain what kind of connection you want with Teams. What do you expect that happens in Teams? I'm interested. So I think very interesting all what you show, Daniel. Do you have other things that you can show?
Oh, look, it's endless, Freerk, but eventually people get bored of hearing from me. So I think that was all I planned to show.
Okay, perfect. The question is using Teams to communicate about things in Top Desk.
Yeah, so one thing that's maybe interesting to bring up here is what we call our crit sit process. So when we have a priority one ticket that comes in via Top Desk, then what we do is we initiate what's called our crit sit process. So I haven't really got it ready to demonstrate right now, but our crit sit process is run via a Power App. And so what can happen is when the priority one comes in via Top Desk, we initiate the crit sit process and we connect that Top Desk ticket via the Power App into a brand new channel that we create inside of our crit sit team. And inside the crit sit team, we quickly bring in the people that we need to collaborate on the particular crit sit. and we kick off a meeting and we start to identify who needs to work on what and who needs to do the communication, and how we manage the process towards resolving that crit sit as efficiently as possible. We do text messages to key stakeholders and all those sorts of things. So we definitely top desk into Teams is a really important integration for us. And on the Swagger OpenAI API definitions, so I'm not going to go into detail here. Here is a tool that I use called pour, which is very much like Postman. And this is where I test all of my APIs. So here, for example, here's how I can get purchases out of Exact. This is what's called JSON. Sorry.
If you want to show something, then you have to share
share my screen. Sorry, I'm going to share my screen again. Sharing my screen. So this is about the question about Swagger and Open API. So I'm going to share my screen. This is a tool called Pour, which is very much like Postman. So it's a developer-centric tool, but it just allows you to quickly test your APIs. So here's the API. Here are the parameters you passed, and here's a refresh. Right now it's talking to Exact, and it gets in my JSON response over here on the right-hand side. What I can do in here is I can export, I think, where is it? Export down here. I can export this entire collection as a Swagger export collection. And then what's nice is over here in the custom connector, I can actually say import directly from an open API or a Swagger file. So I can do all of my development or my testing for my connector inside of Pour or Postman. And then after I've done, I save it and I import it, and I'm ready to go with my custom connector. So it's quite a nice little development workflow that you can build up to build those custom connectors.
Interesting. So because a lot of people say that, or Microsoft is saying that the Power Platform is a low-code, no-code platform, but indeed it is possible to enrich it with a lot of code and test everything.
Well, yeah, so it's not really code. All you're doing is, the code is the API, and Swagger is a way of describing the API so that it can be more easily consumed. And so where an API doesn't have already Swagger or Open API definitions, then you can go and create them yourself using a tool like Postman or Pour. I'll also just finally point out the custom connector interface in Flow. It also has that capability built into it, so you can create your custom connector just using the web, just using the Flow interface. You don't have to use Postman or Pour. It's just a bit easier for testing purposes to have them available. The next question is, how do you manage all the information, dependencies, and flows? Is there a logical way to keep track of them? Look, it's not easy. Flow is, I think they've still got a way to go from a maturity perspective to make it more manageable in the enterprise. There are a lot of things I would talk about perhaps in another webinar that we've done to try and manage flows better. So for example, I've implemented my own versioning capability for Flow. I've got my own logging tool for Flow. I've got my own details view that help me track how long particular flows take to run. So there's a lot of hints and tips that we've developed over the last year and a half that make Flow easier to manage, but fundamentally it's still a bit of a difficult platform to manage. And that's making some good progress with things like solutions. But Power Apps is a little bit further ahead. They have a lot of things around application lifecycle management. They have things around quality controls and performance testing. So Power Apps is a little bit further ahead than Flow, but it's going to get there, I think.
Nice. So I think we're becoming at the end of the webinar. I think you've showed a lot of interesting things, quite functional, but also a little bit of technical. And I think there were really good questions, and we've covered them all. If people are really interested in using Power Automate and platform and have more in-depth questions about this, please feel free to email us, because then I can connect you to Daniel or one of my colleagues with a lot of Power Platform knowledge. and we can think with you how you can use it to get the most out of the platform. There's one question: how to start to create my own Power App? What do I need? Requirements.
I think you need an Office 365 license or a Power App license in your Office 365 environment. And then you just need to go to the Power App Studio. And once you're in the Power App Studio, you're up and running.
Yeah. Yeah, but from what I understand is that people that aren't really technical can learn it in 1 or 2 days. If you just click around, you see 1 or 2 webinars, or YouTube videos. It's quite easy to learn the basics.
Yeah, I think if you were someone who previously did some advanced things with Excel formulas, or if you were someone that used to build Access databases, then I think you're going to be pretty at home with Power Apps. A bit like Flow, it's quite accessible. But if you're going to build complicated things, then it's difficult too. To build complicated things, there are a lot of things you need to think about, especially if you get into scenarios like offline capabilities, working with large data sets. That's when it gets a bit tricky. But for just the sort of application like you saw with the bed counting app, yeah, anyone can do that, like Freerk said, in probably just a couple of days.
Yeah, very interesting. So I want to end this webinar. Thank you very much, Daniel, for all the knowledge and the demo material.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you coming, spend a bit of time with us.
Yeah. Ilse just added a link to a webinar where we're going more into details of creating your own apps for yourself. So please click on that link if you are interested. And again, if you have questions about it, you can email Rapid Circle, info@rapidcircle.com, with your questions about this, and we'll definitely take contact with you about it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.